Hello everyone. In today's lecture, we are going about behavior that is pretty popular in swarm robotics and swarm intelligence that it's been studied quite a lot. And this behavior is called aggregation. Also, we are going to be talking about a variation called swarm taxes. Aggregation is a very basic behavior in some robotics, but it could have a great potential that we can use in many real applications. In a nutshell, aggregation is all about a group of robots staying together as a group. This is more complicated than it sounds, and we are going to see how this can be achieved. The applications of this in the real world is, as I'm showing in the image, we can contain oil with this behavior when the oil spreads in the sea. But I'm gonna talk about more about the applications later on. Without any further ado, let's start. Aggregation and swarm taxes. This talk is gonna be divided into three parts. The first one is gonna be about aggregation, the basic algorithm that is used and how we can find it in biology, the alpha and beta variations, and finally the swarm taxes. Let's start with aggregation. Aggregation in biology. As you know, swarm robotics is very inspired in biology, and aggregation is not an exception from it. Aggregation, we can find it from undersea with fishes, in school of fishes that are trying to stay together, to the small animals like cockroaches that they pack in groups, to larger animals like gazelles and other animals. Why is this behavior important in nature? Well, it's because if you are in a group with other mates or with other animals like you, it is easier to survive predators or other animals that want to eat you. Why? There are multiple theories about it. The first theory is that because in a group of animals there are more eyes. So you can see all around you where the predator can come from and you can avoid it. Another group of animals are more clever, and what they do is that they put younger animals or animals that are weak in the middle of the group, and they can protect them better from predators. So yes, in biology this behavior is very important. And yeah, as I was saying before, in the school of fishes you can find it. But why aggregation is important in robotics? I have already explained to you why is this important in biology. But what about in robotics? Why is this important? Well, imagine that you are exploring space and you don't have access to GPS. So, how do you manage to prevent robots getting lost in your group of robots in space? Well, you implement an aggregation algorithm where the robots are trying to stay together, and in this way, no robots are gonna get lost. Another important aspect of aggregation is containment. I'm gonna talk more about it in the third section. But what if you want to surround a target? It is easier to do it if the group of robots is packed together, and we're gonna see this later on in this lecture. So yeah, there are many reasons why aggregation is important in robotics. So, as I was saying before, it's the ability of the group of staying together. We can find it in different places in nature. And if you had a central computer handling this, it will be really easy to solve because you just tell each robot where to go and where to stay. But in a decentralized way, this is not as easy as it sounds. And we are going to see this. So, why is it difficult? Because the robots have to use local information. As I was saying before in the example space, there is no GPS, so the robots have to exchange information to stay together. Also, the range of communication is not unlimited. There is a range of communications that they can use. And also, the robots have to keep receiving signals. In most in the most basic aggregation algorithm, how it works is that the robots receive signals from each other. So it's basically saying, "Ooh, I have a neighbor close by me. Ooh, I have a neighbor close by me." And how do I know this? Because I'm receiving a signal from my neighbor. But the problem of this is that we don't know where this signal is coming from. But is this important? Is this information relevant? Well, we're gonna see later on in this same lecture. So, okay, I can receive signals from my neighbors. How do I know if I'm too far away from my neighbors? Easily. As soon as I stop receiving signals, that means that there's no one around me. What should I do next? I need to turn and go back to the last position where the swarm was. So, the recipe. Move forward until lose connection to neighbors. So, the robot is gonna be moving forwards, avoiding obstacles, but as soon as it doesn't receive any messages from its neighbors, it's gonna be, whoop, step 2, turn 180 degrees and go back. And then go to step 1. In this way, we are gonna have that emergent behavior with these simple 3 steps. Okay? Cool. Let's see an example, just to make it more clear. Robot orange sends a signal. Robot blue receives it. Robot blue sends a signal. Robot orange sends a signal. Receives the signal. And the dotted arrows, the dotted lines represent the range of communication. This is just a very basic example about how the communication works. Let's see a more complicated example. We have robot A and F. Okay? The robot F is moving forwards with direction of the arrow. But guess what? Robot F is out of the range of robot A, which means that it doesn't receive signals anymore from robot A. What should the robot F do next? Well, it should turn 180 degrees and go back. And then it's gonna be again close to robot A. So in this way they are together close. This is a more complicated example. Each robot is going to a different direction, but how many robots lost communication with their neighbors? F and B. F and B are not receiving signals from its neighbors. So what are they gonna do next? They're gonna turn 180 degrees and they're gonna go back and they're gonna be again with the group. So yes, this is the most basic form of the aggregation algorithm. It has a few problems and we're gonna see next what are these problems. But first, the advantages. This algorithm is really flexible in the sense that the robots are quite loose. They move like waves. And the communication is very simple. You don't need to send a lot of information. You just need to send, hey, I'm a neighbor. I'm close to you. And that's it. So the computation expenses are not very high. And what are the problems? Well, it means that this swarm is very reactive. What do we mean by reactive? It means that as soon as the robot is getting out of range of robots, it's gonna turn and it's gonna go back. So the robots are gonna do a lot of oscillations. Why is this a problem? Because the energy that it takes to do these movements. If a swarm is very reactive, it's gonna take more energy, and our batteries are gonna last less time. And also, this is not a very stable. Robots still can get lost with this algorithm. Well, let's have a look at other variants of the algorithm that try to overcome these problems. The first one is alpha, and the second one is beta. First, the alpha algorithm. Right, alpha algorithm. In the previous algorithm, the robots were sending very basic messages to each other. It was about absence or presence of neighbors. An important characteristic of this algorithm is that we are adding a little bit more information to those messages. So each robot in their messages they're sent their ID. They're saying, oh, I'm robot A, I'm robot B, I'm robot C. So when I receive the messages from my neighbors, I can be like, I receive a message from A, from B, and from C. So I received a messages from 3 neighbors. So now we can count how many neighbors are around us. And now we can say, okay, I know that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 neighbors close by me. Now, our, our turn as a designers of this algorithm, we need to specify how many robots we want in our neighborhood. And this value is alpha. Alpha specifies how many robots you want in the neighborhood. In other words, if I'm receiving, if my alpha is equal to 4, it means that I want at least 4 neighbors. But as soon as I have less than 4 neighbors, that's not good. That means that I'm starting to get lost. So I'm gonna turn 180 degrees and go back. And this is gonna prevent the issue that we were having in the previous algorithm, where the robot was very reactive and it was very compact. Now we have more freedom. The robot doesn't need to turn often. We can save more energy. And yeah, we just need to find the appropriate value of alpha for a specific swarm. So the higher the alpha, that means that you're gonna have the more compact the swarm that you want. So, and if you want a stable aggregation swarm, you need a value of aggregation of n divided by 2 or above, which means that you want to have at least half of your neighbors in your neighborhood. So, recipe, move forwards until the number of neighbors is below of alpha. If your number of neighbors is below alpha, turn 180 degrees and move forwards. go to step 1, rinse and repeat. Very basic, 3 steps, and we can get a more stable and better aggregation behavior with the cost of processing a little bit more of information. Again, this is an example. Now, each robot knows how many neighbors it has. It's that small rectangle on the top left. In this way, we can know how many neighbors we want in our neighborhood. So robot E moves from the previous position to the new position. In the previous position, robot E had 2 neighbors. In this new position, the robot E has 2 neighbors. Should it turn 180 degrees and go back, or should it move forwards? It should keep moving forwards because we are still in number 2, it's not still below 2. So we are still good with our neighborhood. But what if the robot keeps moving? Now robot E has 1 neighbor. So should robot E turn 180 degrees and go back, or should it keep moving forwards? Well, it should turn 180 degrees and go back because it's starting to feel lost. So yes, this is the alpha algorithm. Yeah, there are some problems with it. For example, some topologies, so for example, how the robots are connected, are gonna define if the robots are gonna get disconnected or not. Or in other words, it means that if you have an obstacle in the middle of your group of robots, that can interfere with your neighborhood. That can define how many neighbors or how many robots are close to you. And also, we are taking account only the number of neighbors. But is this information relevant? For example, if I lose connection with 2 robots, am I lost? Are these 2 robots important? Are these 2 robots key for the aggregation behavior? Well, in bit algorithm, we are gonna take even more information, and now we can know if we are losing connection to important robots, because now we can have even more stable behaviors. Right. In this algorithm, now the information that we are transmitting from one robot to the other is increasing and is becoming more complex, which means that it's becoming a little bit more computational expensive. So, in the previous algorithm, alpha, we were receiving the IDs of the robots because now we can distinguish and we can tell how many robots are around us. But now, with the bit algorithm, we receive a list of robots. Well, actually, we receive multiple lists of robots. So, each robot sends how many neighbors and which neighbors are around it. And I, as a robot, receive all these lists, and now I can compare all the lists and say, oh, yeah, if I lose this neighbor, does it matter? Is this neighbor important? Oh yeah, it does. So we need to do something. And this is how the beta algorithm works. Each robot sends a list of neighbors, so the neighbors that surround that specific robot. And all the robots receive this list. So if I lose connection with one of the robots, I'm gonna check how many other robots lost connection with this robot. If many robots, if if just a few robots lose connection with this robot, that means that probably I'm getting I'm losing connection to an important robot and I need to turn 180 degrees and go back. So, the recipe, again, move forwards until the, the number of neighbors losing connection with a specific robot is greater than B. That means that many robots are losing this robot. Turn 180 degrees and move forward. Here's an example of it. Robot A moves from one point to the other, but robot A will see how many neighbors the other robots have. But the connection that it lost with D, robot D is still connected to robot B and F, so it doesn't matter. So the robot can continue its life. But if robot D is moving as well, so robot A lost connection with D, robot F lost connection with D, and this means that the robot is getting too far away and needs to turn 180 degrees and move back. And yeah, and this is just a graph to show how the robots are connected with each other. So there are advantages, of course, of this algorithm. And it's about that we have now more information and we can take more complex decisions according to this information. Now we can have a more stable connections and we can have a more stable aggregation behavior. Again, as I was repeating myself before, this is with the expense of more processing information and it's a little bit more computational expensive. But you might be wondering, so what? This is not a big expense. I can compute this easily. In simulations, this is easy because everything is synchronized. But as soon as you're starting with hardware, it's gonna be asynchronized. Therefore, the communication that the robots are having with each other is not gonna be perfect, and this is gonna become an issue later on. But yeah, don't worry about this. I'm gonna talk about it later in a different lecture. And again, I was saying, I was just saying this. As soon as you translate this behavior to real robots, it's not going to work that well because yeah, the lists are not gonna be updated as soon as we want, and probably we're receiving lists way ahead of the time that we want it, or there's gonna be delays. So yeah, you have to be careful with this because when you have communication with real robots in a swarm, they're not gonna be synchronized. Cool. Swarm taxes. Swarm taxes is a very interesting behavior, and this is slightly it's a variation of aggregation. In swarm taxes, you have a group of robots trying to stay together, or in other words, aggregate, and move towards a target. Most of the time, that target is gonna be some kind of beacon, like a light. But yeah, let's have a look at more details. Taxis is about a group of robots moving towards something. This could be light, this could be a chemical, this could be heat, this could be sound. It doesn't matter, the robots can do it. And the robots are gonna move together as a group. Why are they moving towards a target as a group? Well, as I was saying before, we don't want the robots to get lost. For example, if you're doing this undersea, it's easier to get lost. But if you're with your other colleagues, with your other robots, you're not gonna get lost. And this aggregation behavior is important because of that. How does it work? Well, it works by using a concept called symmetry breaking. In this symmetry breaking, it means that as the robots are doing their behavior, their aggregation behavior, some of them, some of the robots are gonna break the rules and are gonna be, I'm receiving the light from that direction. I'm gonna move towards that direction. So therefore, if you have these two groups, one of them is gonna break and is gonna move towards the target. There are some aspects that you should consider when you are designing the robots. One of them is that if you're using a beacon like a light, it should be it, it should this light should face all the directions, which means that it's important that your robots have omnidirectional sensors. By omnidirectional sensors, I mean that you can detect where the light is coming from any direction in the 380 degrees. Another important aspect that you should consider is that not all the robots are gonna be seeing the beacon at all times. And this is very, very important because if all the robots see the beacon at all times, you are not gonna have this symmetry breaking behavior. You need some of the robots to not see the light at all times. Just a few of them, just the edge of the swarm. So these robots that are seeing the beacon are gonna shadow the other robots that are behind it. Okay? So yeah, this is just a few things that you should keep in mind. Right. This is just a diagram explaining exactly the same things that I just said, where you have your beacon on the right hand side, the small circle, that is just like a light bulb that is throwing light everywhere. You have your group of robots on the left hand side, but not all the robots are seeing this beacon, only the ones on the edge on the right hand side. If you can notice the colors, the dark gray are not seeing the beacon, the light gray are seeing the beacon. Let's have a look at the example again. We have these 6 robots, A, B, C, D, F, and there is a beacon on the right hand side. If we follow the same concept or the same principle that I was just explaining before, which robots are gonna move towards the beacon? Yes, robot E, D, and B, because they are shadowing the light to other robots. So these robots are gonna move towards the beacon. But guess what? Now they are too far away from the other robots. They have lost connection with those robots. What's gonna happen next? Well, they're gonna turn 180 degrees and they're gonna go back. But the other robots are moving as well with the other robots because they lost connection with those 3 robots. So yes, this is a symmetry breaking. Some robots break from the swarm, the other robots try to catch up, but the robots that broke from the swarm now are too far and they need to go back, and this is the behavior that you see. These kind of waves where a group of robots break, they come together, break, they come together, break, they come together. In this way, you can have the swarm taxis emergent behavior. Here's a video of a simulation of a group of robots doing this behavior. The yellow robots are seeing the light or the beacon is on the right hand side. The gray robots are not seeing the light. As you can see, there is a group of robots that are always trying to follow the beacon, but at the same time they're trying to stick close to the storm, so they are not too far away from it. And the other robots are trying to catch up. And now the robots have reached the target. And let's see one example with real robots. These are the epoch robots. These are the robots that I was just explaining in the last lecture. The epoch robot has some IR sensors all around it. The beacon emits IR light, which means that the epochs know where the light is coming from and they can towards the beacon. Also, the epochs have range and bearing, so they can communicate with each other and see how many neighbors they have and see how many connections they have lost. So yeah, let's see it. Something that you are seeing here is that two of the robots break, but as you might remember, one of the properties in some robotics is robustness, which means if one of the robots break, it doesn't matter, not even two. They just leave behind these two robots and they reach the target. Something important that I'd like to say about this is that this is not always the case. Some robotics is not always robust. And there are a few occasions where this is not the case and we need to think about it. But yeah, I'm not gonna get into details because that's part of a different lecture. So yeah, basically, but the robots that I was showing are using the beta algorithm with the beta set into infinite, which means that as soon as the robots lose connection with the robot, they're gonna turn 180 degrees and they're gonna go back. So just to keep a very compact swarm. And with this, we can produce the emergent behavior of swarm taxes. Okay, so yes, uh, the recipe is very easy. Just follow the beacon until losing connection. If you lose connection, turn 180 degrees and move forwards. Go to step one and just repeat this over and over and over again and you're gonna have this emergent behavior. Now let's move to the applications. Where can we use swarm taxes? Well, there is a very famous application of this, and it's called encapsulation. And this means that you have your group of robots moving towards a target, and then they surround the target. And can you think about some real world applications of this? I have already mentioned one at the very beginning of the lecture. Well, I'm gonna talk about that later. Just think about it. And yeah, there are some disadvantages of it, of course. That if you wanna have this emergent behavior, communication is key. If you don't have communication, then you're not gonna have this emergent behavior. And also it's difficult to implement in hardware because I have already mentioned it before. In simulations, everything is synchronized, but as soon as you move to hardware, it's not synchronized. So if you lose connection, probably you didn't lose it because your message was delayed. So yeah, the summary are very useful behaviors. They are very easy to implement. I show you the recipes or algorithms. 3 steps, that's all it takes. This can be implemented in 2 dimensions, but there is no reason why you can use it in 3 dimensions. You can have your robots exploring space, undersea, have drones doing aggregation. You can use it. Okay, applications. This is an interesting thing. One application that you can use for these swarm taxes is that if there is a black oil spillage on this sea, you could send your group of robots and contain that black oil from spreading. And you know that this is really important because black oil on sea can kill many birds, can kill animals, and it's really bad for the ecosystem. So if there was a way to prevent this, and if we could use this algorithm, that would be great. And this is very good because you don't need any centralized system. You just need to send your robots and surround the oil with it. Another application, but this is more in the future, in the long term, is in health. There are tumors that grow inside of bodies. We can have small robots inside of people or animals, and you can send these robots in a swarm taxis to find these tumors and to contain it, to, to stop the tumor from spreading. And this is, again, this is really important because you could save the lives of people. And you don't need a computer to control the robots because each robot knows what to do. So yeah, some very important applications of this that you can use in the real world with a very basic algorithm that we have already explained. So yeah, to recap, in the first third of the talk, we mentioned where we can find aggregation in biology. How does the very basic aggregation algorithm work in some robotics? Why aggregation in some robotics is important? And it's important because of these applications, because we can keep the robots together. We saw some algorithms. We saw that if we want a more stable aggregation algorithm, we need to add more information to the messages. But the more information you add to the messages, the more complicated it gets because the robot has to process more information. And this doesn't translate as well in real hardware. In the last part, we talked about the swarm taxis, a variation of aggregation where a group of robots is moving towards a target, and you can have encapsulation to contain that substance in a real world application. Here are some reading some cool videos that I found where they explain uh, how the aggregation works in biology and why is it important. And yeah, this is it. Thank you very much for listening to this lecture. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate in sending to me an email. And then thanks. Have a nice day.